what drove me to do this podcast and to share this information with people was that we live in such a data-driven society today, now, and my goal is to put a human face on some of those numbers. So we hear, 13.4% of prisoners in the state of Pennsylvania are given life in prison. The rest of the country's average for life imprisonment is 3.4%. But what does that mean to a real person? What does that mean to their family, to their community? My goal is that we see faces of humans and not just the number, and learn some of the stories of what happened to people, why they are where they are, and what we can do to allow people who have served their time to be able to come back into society without that burden haunting them for the rest of their lives. So, some of the big questions that I have: how do we break down barriers and destigmatize incarceration so people can thrive afterwards? And how do we make changes to the system to avoid incarceration in the first place? And perhaps try other alternatives like treatment. These are big questions. And as I mentioned, part of why I feel like I can speak to them is that when I was 15, there was a knock on the door about 5:30 in the morning, and I answered that door, and there were, maybe 5 to 7 gentlemen in navy blue jackets with big, bright yellow letters, DEA, and Drug Enforcement Agency. And my father was arrested and taken away. My father had been addicted to cocaine probably from the time I was 7. And it's pretty traumatic growing up with a parent using drugs. And then to have that parent end up going to prison was also traumatic. And I felt a lot of shame that wasn't mine, but I still held that shame. And so again, part of this podcast is to help family members and those who were incarcerated learn to let go of some of that shame. Learn to know when it's theirs to carry and when it isn't. And so, so the goal really is to promote healing and to have conversations, important conversations, about these kinds of traumas and how we can move beyond them. So I'm going to allow my amazing guests, Suave Gonzalez, Jeffrey Abramowitz, and Kimpedro Rodriguez, to announce themselves, tell a little bit of their story, and then I may interrupt them with questions. And then we should have an interesting conversation. They have some pretty amazing stories.
My name is Suave Gonzalez, former juvenile lifer. I went in at the age of 17 with an IQ of 56, according to the state. I learned how to read and write in solitary confinement, where I spent 7 years. I learned how to paint in solitary confinement. I served in total of 31 and a half years and 85 days and 26 hours. That's how much time I served in the state prison. Came home in 2017, discovered the phones for the first time, started recorded a podcast, got an edit with my producers, and and below, I became the first formerly incarcerated person in the United States of America to win a Pulitzer Prize. I also won IDA, which is an International Documentary Award, which is like the Oscars in podcasts. And my story is just the same story you hear in urban communities. People get caught up. I went to prison for a crime I didn't commit, for a crime that somebody that was with me committed. That person served 2 years, I served 31 years because I didn't take a plea deal. I was offered a 5-year deal. I refused. I ended up serving life. The person that actually did the crime ended up serving 5 years. And I'll tell you more in a minute.
That's kind of hard to follow. Bob and I are good friends. So my name is Jeff Abramowitz. My story is a little bit different than that. I was born and bred in Philadelphia. My life wanted to be a lawyer, and went to undergrad school at Ohio State, law school out in Michigan, and then came back to Philadelphia and practiced law for a little over 20 years. A little over 14 years ago, made some really bad choices in life, and I'm really intentional on my words. They're choices. I don't think people make mistakes. I think we make choices, and those choices don't turn out so great, and therefore we learn from them, and that's what it's really all about. Einstein has a great line. He says, if you make 10 bad choices a day, you're just not trying hard enough, because that's how you learn. Made some bad choices and took responsibility for financial crime, and ended up being sentenced to 5 years in a federal prison, upstate Pennsylvania. Returned back to Philly, it was 10 years ago in September, and lived in a homeless shelter for a year. My first job was living in North Philadelphia teaching GED math at Broad and Lehigh, and then progressed and quickly became a director of an adult literacy agency in Philadelphia. After that, worked my way up, started doing programming, took a seat on the governor, who's the attorney general, who's now governor, appointed me to the Pennsylvania Workforce Development Board and Pennsylvania's Reentry Council, and then worked my way to become an executive director at Jabs Human Services in Philadelphia, which is probably the largest workforce agency in Philadelphia, where I oversaw all their criminal justice programming that was there. The day I got my job at Jabs, I also became head of the Coalition of Adult Basic Education and their Prison Literacy Commission across the country. And then shortly after that began working for the U.S. Department of Education, which I held up until recently. My letter last Monday notifying me that my contracts with the DOE were stopped. However, after I left Jabs 2 years ago, I took a CEO position with an organization called the PD Green Program, and became the CEO of an organization that's the largest multi-state nonprofit in the country that does educational support for men and women that are incarcerated and people coming home from incarceration. Our model is really simple. We use thousands and thousands of volunteers, all from colleges and communities across the country. We train them to go and become tutors, and they work inside jails and prisons and work on the outside as people come home to help people get smarter. High school diploma, bridge to college, vocational training, digital literacy, financial literacy, anything that will help them academically succeed. And it's been a remarkable journey. For me, I do work across the country now. We're in 16 states across the country, making change happen one student at a time.
And it works. I was one of those students.
My name is Kimpedro, and my story is a lot different from both of yours. I want to use something that Jeff said. I made some bad choices at the height of my career. In 1985, I had graduated from college a year before, and I got the ideal job working with the city of Philadelphia. I'm sorry. And I was tempted to get involved with the drug game because of the fact somebody told me I worked too hard. I had 2 regular jobs and a part-time job. And I was challenged because they said, "Oh, hey, you're working too hard. Come and see us and we'll make it a lot easier for you." But I made the wrong choice. I got involved. And not only did I decide to become a part of the drug game, being a part of the drug game, I ended up getting addicted. And in my addiction, I'm gonna tell you, I don't even know how to put in words some of the things I experienced. I was a very spiritual person. So when I was addicted, I found out that I was walking a tightrope between heaven and hell. Some of the things that I went through, I couldn't believe. So I had to start documenting and drawing sketches because nobody would believe what I was going through. So I actually was able to write 43 poetic essays in my addiction, series of sketches, to a point where the officers in the neighborhood didn't want to lock me up because they wanted to see where I would go with these. But when I finally did get locked up, that officer took my sketches and all my notes and he put them up. While I was in prison, it was only by the grace of God that God made me realize the gifts that he had given me that I had screwed up in the world, he was using prison to rebuild and reshape me. So it was there in prison that I was able to use the gift of my background in illustration, my background in writing, and also just being an educator to help some of the inmates who were there develop their social skills, their writing skills. I also was in charge of an art program and took over the music program while I was also in prison. And so all of those skill sets, I was able to use them to help not only produce art exhibits from prison, musical concerts, but also help the inmates communicate with their lawyers and their families, because a lot of them couldn't talk, a lot of them couldn't write, and a lot of their letters never made it past the front office. So I was able to use those skill sets. And even just to show the grace of God, once my sentence was over, I didn't get sent to a halfway house like most people do when they're in prison. I was sent straight to Eagleville to a working person's program because of some of the things that we had accomplished in prison. I started the first prison newspaper called The City Behind the Wall. We did the literacy program, we did the art program, and I was allowed to actually come out of the prison to attend my own art exhibit. But now what I do today is I'm an educator. I'm teaching children from 5 to 12, giving them alternatives, letting them realize they don't have to be adults to be successful or to follow their dreams. They can start young. I also took the skill sets that I learned in prison, how to put art exhibits together and concerts together. And now what I do is I run an organization called the New Groove Network, where I do a multi-generational situation where I bring artists from 20 years old to 70 years old together for a presentation and just use those skill sets to try to make the communities better. I go into the communities, I go back to the neighborhood I destroyed by selling drugs, and I at least once a year go back and teach there. So my commitment to the community is really stronger than it was before I got incarcerated, because I realized that I have a lot of gifts to offer and I don't want them just to be wasted on me. So that's what I'm doing now, just being available to whoever needs me to help save as many lives as I can, and using my book and my stories to tell people that there is hope and that God's outstretched hand is not too far from them.
So we have three men with very different experiences, but they were all able to sort of, it's a weird word to say, but leverage their prison time to help them find a new way forward. And I'm just interested to know Suave. So Suave's story is really intense. I mean, this is a man who learned how to read in solitary confinement, and who spent 7 years in solitary confinement. At 17 years old, can you imagine that? There was a lot of deprivation there, but somehow he didn't lose hope. So
No, that.
I want you to share with people, how were you able to survive that time behind the walls?
I mean, when I went to prison in the 80s, prison were different than what they are today. There was a lot of drugs, there was a lot of violence, there was a lot of everything. And for some reason, I just ended up in the worst prison in the state, which was Grattisville. And when I went there, it was like, how did I get here? That's the first thing I asked myself. You know, as the bus was riding, the wall from afar looked small, but then it just started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I looked up the wall, then the gate opened, and I was like, oh my God, this is it. So I went in with the mentality, like, I'm gonna survive. In the first few years, you know, I did everything. I got caught up in the jail system. I really got caught up. But then I ended up in solitary confinement because a good friend of mine sent me a book that I couldn't even read. And I was in the hallway, and one of the guards tried to take the book. He snatched the book out of my hand, and I reacted. Like, oh, now give my book back. And I'm gonna tell you the story on that. It was a book that Maria and the horses sent me. It was her first book. And I couldn't read it, but I had that book. I was like, damn, this is the first author I ever met in my life, the first journalist. So he took my book, and I was like, you're gonna have to fight for that book. And we started fighting in the hallway. And since he put his hands on me first, I defended myself. And they couldn't charge me with a new charge, but they gave me 7 years in solitary confinement. And when I get there, I was like, it was the worst. Because you by yourself, and back then they only had this thing called Siberia. and Gratisford. That was like the only hole that served as death row too. So it was real small, real isolated. I'm there, I'm listening to the rats. There was big rats in there, roaches, I'm counting the cracks. You know, I used to trace letters like A, B, C on the floor on the dust. And to me, it was like, you can't break me. I always said it, the system cannot break me. I come from a family of strong people. My mother was strong. My mother always told me, no matter what happens to us, we're gonna survive. And I always had that mentality. So I get to the hole, and I end up going to commissary. And next door there was this older gentleman, and he was like, if you buy me some Little Debbie, some cupcakes, I'll give you 10 words a day. And that was my journey to education. I just give him cupcakes, and he give me 10 words a day. To the point where I would just start memorizing words. So I opened a book up, and I know the words that he was teaching me. And we did that like for 2 years. And when I got out the hole, I told him I'm gonna get my GED. I tried 7 times, and I kept failing because of the math. Then I hired a tutor. I'm like, you want to smoke some Newports? It was like, sure. I needed to show me some math. And then I met this wonderful guy that I knew from the county. You probably know him, Stan Rosenthal. And he was good at math, but he liked to eat. And I was like, I'm gonna buy you some food. And that was my education. So I got my GED after 7 tries. On the same day that I got my GED, I'm walking out the school building, and I looked over, I seen a college class. I was like, I want to sign up for that. And the professor gave me a hard time. He's like, you're not ready. And I was like, okay, I'm signing up now. And I signed up, and my first grade, I never forget, was a C. But I thought I had an A. Because I was like, dang, everybody's looking at me, you got a C, bro. And these guys in the class were scholars. But to me, it was an accomplishment because I didn't cheat. It's something I earned. I kept going back. So I told the professor, what is it going to take for you to tutor me? And he said, you got to stay after class, which nobody wanted to do, not in the jail, because now you got to stay out for count. And I was like, oh, man, I stay after class. And hold below Dr. Best, he passed away a few years ago, tutored me. And from that time to the time I graduated, I never read a book. I swear to God, I never read a book because he showed me how to write papers in class with his lectures. So every class I went, I'd always listen to the professor and just started writing what they was writing on the board. And that's how I wrote my papers. And that's how I was able to graduate from Villanova University with a bachelor's degree with a 3.5. And for me, it was like, it's not enough. After that, you know, people in general population was like, oh, Suave just went crazy. Because now I went from being this wild kid to like preaching education. I created the Education Over Incarceration Scholarship from inside Gratisford, where we was collecting money inside and sending it to children of incarcerated parents for college. We did that.
That's beautiful.
We raised thousands and thousands of dollars. And then I became a ghostwriter for people that write books. They used to send me their manuscript for me to juice it up and work on it for a couple of dollars. I didn't mind doing that because it was a hustle. Then I became the president of the organization, the only Latino organization in the state of Pennsylvania in the prison system. I became a president of that. Then I just started calling radio stations, using my 15-minute phone call, calling people, giving my little take. And that was my introduction into the podcast world. And to me, it was about proving the system. You classified me as a child with an IQ of 56, and you wrote in these legal documents that this man is mentally retarded, would never learn how to read and write. And what I tell people today, how does it feel that same person you said was mentally retarded today is the first formerly incarcerated person to hold a person? I mean, either the doctors or the psychiatrists had it wrong, or I'm a genius. I don't know. You tell me.
Both.
I mean, you tell me. But it's a testament that when you give people a second chance, you never know what would happen. They wrote me off. I didn't give up. There was times when I wanted to give up because it took 16 years to get a degree from Villanova because it was part-time. 16 years from the day I started. But I finished it. I did what everybody said I couldn't do, was get out of jail and be something. And today I travel the country, speaking and going to different schools. I was just telling you, I'd rather be home now because it just got bored. It's boring now. It really is. After you tell your story one or twice, it's like, oh, okay, here we go, the same thing. But somebody has to do it. Somebody got to educate the people that everybody in prison is not bad. People do transform, and I'm one of them.
Thank you. And so part of the issue, I think, is that there are a lot of people that are in prison that work really hard while they're there to transform and to change. And I've been able to speak with a lot of them on my podcast, and a lot of them really credit faith, and a lot of them credit turning to God and spirituality. But one of the things that I believe is really important for us to try to do in our daily lives, that we can all do today, is to give a chance to people that were formerly incarcerated in the employment space, to allow people that spent time in jail to have jobs and careers where they can succeed. And I want to give this over to Jeff to talk a little bit about how PD Green is helping do that, the PD Green organization.
So, it's a loaded question, because there's a lot to talk about. But PD Green, the premise of the whole entire organization, and PD Green, you should know, was a DJ in Washington. And there's a great movie called Talk to Me that's about PD Green and his journey. But he was a DJ in Washington that the class of 58 at Princeton University took a passion to, and they named the program after him. And our main offices are up in Princeton's campus now, where we have a building. But the core premise of people going through our criminal legal system is to know what happens next, the end, then what. Look, 95+% of people behind bars are coming home at some point in their lifetime. So if we don't help them transition on the way out, then what do we really think is going to happen? They're going to continue to go through the cycle, go back to the neighborhoods, and the way I often explain it is, outside of every prison and jail in our country is this really fast-flowing water. And our job as a society is to help people cross that water, where they're going to flow back into the neighborhoods and some of the challenges that they faced growing up and that got them into trouble to begin with. And we have to be able to help them know that there's a better way. Suave is living proof of it. But the truth for me is that it's education. It's getting people smarter inside and getting them to understand that there could be a better way. I remember you hit me with a lot of different funny stories, but I taught a CDL class when I was in prison. Now, I had never been in the tractor trailer of a truck before. I had never been in a cab of a tractor before. I had no idea how to drive a tractor trailer. But what I did know was that the men that I was living with, they could drive a truck probably better than anyone because they'd done it for years. Now, a lot of them had drugs on their trucks, but they were driving a truck. And they knew how to do that really well. What they couldn't do was they couldn't pass the CDL test. Like, they didn't read well enough, they didn't know math well enough, they needed to get some of that basic literacy skill. So the PD Green program really works to educate people and give them that knowledge that they need to get a high school diploma, to come out, get a career credential, or at least think about going to college as their next step. And I spoke this morning to the Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, and I speak tomorrow at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Washington. And the truth is we need to educate employers that right now there is a talent pool out there that is untapped because of a criminal background. And there are people out there. We have more jobs in our country today than we have people to fill them. And this is a body of the labor pool where they're just untapped. And simply because they made choices in their life that landed them with a criminal record. And we have to get employers to understand that it's okay to hire individuals that that could be very useful for your company and that have that skill set. But we have to break down some of those walls in order to do it. And this morning we talked to a whole host of employers to teach them, including SEPTA in Philly. And SEPTA was there, and their head of HR recruitment was there, and he said, look, we're opening the door to everyone that's been impacted because they have value to us and they're good in the labor market. So I think it's changing the narrative. And look, I came out here tonight in particular because these are the audiences that we need to be talking to. You know, Suave and I talk all over the country, I'm sure you do as well, and a lot of our audiences are black and brown. But the truth is that it's, you know, those marginalized populations, many of the audiences we speak to, they know the challenges, the day-to-day challenges of life and what they face. We need to educate the counties. We need to educate everyone to what it's like to go through the system. And I'll be honest with you, I had no freaking idea. I had no idea. And it's funny because you mentioned, I sat on a bus and I swear it was like I was in Fugitive. Do you guys remember that movie, Fugitive? Harrison Ford was on the bus and the bus was derailed and flipped over. I was on that bus. I was sat on that bus, my ankles were shackled, my hands were shackled to the front seat. I was on that bus, headed to a Supermax, just below a Supermax prison, and I'm thinking to myself, what the hell am I doing here? And it's very real, but sometimes you need to experience those situations in order to understand that you need to be learning something. You need to be out there and you need to figure out the why. Like, why did this happen? And then what is it that I'm supposed to be doing with it? And my passion is to educate people around the country that we're all human and that we all make choices and that we have to sometimes learn from them. And that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. Look, I was a lawyer. I practiced in Montgomery County. I practiced in Philadelphia. I was a senior partner at a law firm. And you know, it was hard for my community. I was white, I was Jewish, I was a lawyer, I was active in the bar, I was head of the Philadelphia American Cancer Society in Philadelphia. Like, I did all these things, and the fall from grace was really fast. And it's important for me to come back to those communities that I lost touch with or lost touch with me to say, you know, we have to be forgiving. We have to understand that there's a humanity factor in all this. So it's interesting. It's been a crazy ride for me and a crazy journey, but I'm really passionate about this work, and I think we all have a place to play in this. And the one thing I will tell you, and just a quick story if I can, there was it happened about a year or so ago. My wife and I were walking in Center City at 2nd and Chestnut Street. We just had a good dinner in Center City, and there was a guy sitting on the street, and he had a sign that said, "Need help." And I was like, all right. I went over to him and said, like, what do you need? How can I help you? We just got done dinner. Do you want some really good food? And he's like, no. It's Saturday night in summer. My belly is full. Like, I don't need anything. And I said, well, how can I help you? And he said, I need a guitar. And I'm like, I don't get a lot of requests for guitars, but call me Monday. I gave him my card. And he in fact called me Monday, and I said, where are you? And he said, I'm at 15th and Market Street. And at the time my office was on Rittenhouse Square. I ran over to him and met him. His guy's name was Steven. I said, Steven, what's going on? He said, I was a sous chef for Steven Starr's Restaurants. One of the best restaurants in the city, some of the best restaurants in the city. And he said, in the back of the kitchen, I got addicted to heroin. And both my parents died. I had no place to go. I put myself into a facility. And a year later, he comes out. They took his chef knives. He lost all his clothing in the apartment that he was in. He had no place to shower. He was living on the streets. His guitar was how he made a living, essentially. And that was stolen in a shelter. And we were able to help him out. We got a guitar. I got a guitar in like seconds on social media for him. And we're able to get him a job and get him a membership at the Y so he can get showered and changed. And I tell you the story because there's not a day that goes by in my life that I wake up and I wonder, what if I kept walking that day? Like, what if I kept walking and didn't stop to engage him? And those are the blinders that I had for all the years of my adult life, that I didn't see Steven. I didn't see him. And I think we all have a responsibility in society to see what's right in front of us and to see how we can engage and how we can help him and what does it look like. And sometimes it's the smallest of things, like just a handshake, just a hello, how you doing, have a good day. It's those little things that often can mean the most things.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. I know that, Kimpedro, for you, spirituality was a huge factor in your recovery, and art. And the thing that you and Suave have in common is how art was such a saving grace. If you could just speak to that a little bit, and how you're using art to help change lives now and to keep people, young kids, from going down the path where they're going to end up incarcerated.
I'm a graduate of what's no longer in existence, the Philadelphia College of Art or University of the Arts. And my second art school is also not in existence anymore, Huston School of Art. So I don't exist as an artist. But art was my saving grace. I've got art honest from my mom. My mom was a seamstress artist. She loves to draw and color. So I got that honestly from her. In my addiction, because my priority was drugs, I didn't buy art supplies. What I did was I went to the corner store and I would ask the storekeeper, can I have a stack of those paper bags? He said, sure, take as many as you want, not realizing how much of a blessing that was going to be to me. So I would take the paper bags, and whatever experience I was going through, if I got high, I would get my artwork and I would draw myself back to sobriety, because sometimes the experience that I had when I got high was too intense for me. So I would draw myself back to sobriety. When I finally got locked up, I took the concept of paper bag graphics with me to prison. Pennsylvania Prison Society, on Tuesdays, would send an instructor into the prison. Come to find out, he was one of my colleagues from Philadelphia College of Art. So he managed to talk to the sergeant and told the sergeant, well, since I've got somebody here that I could trust with the art supplies, would it be all right for him to use that and be the in-house prison art teacher in between my visits? So I appreciated that opportunity, because it meant that I would get all the art supplies that I needed. When I told him about my paper bag endeavor, he brought me a whole roll of garbage paper, brought me the pencils that I need, cheap paper made pens, and I was able to actually, to continue my exhibit while I was developing my exhibit while I was in prison. But in the meantime, what I was doing, I was also teaching other people who had just brief information about drawing. I would teach them some basic drawing techniques. I would draw for them. I would draw for their families. I would decorate their envelopes. That was my means of income after a while. You saw an envelope coming out of the prison with this artwork on it. Most times it was from me. And what they would do at one point was even having people sending me money from home for the artwork that I was sending out to them. So with me being the in-house art teacher and me working on a whole series on the paper bags, the sergeant and the Pennsylvania Prison Society got together and said, hey, let's allow him to leave the prison and attend his own art exhibit. I had 17 pieces in the show, all on paper bags. And at that time, Nelson Mandela had gotten released from prison, Sammy Davis had died, and I even had a couple pieces brought in from home. And what I did was I had, and of the 17 pieces that I submitted, 13 of them sold, which blew me away, which made me say, hey, this is a viable medium. So I continued to use that. Today I have a greeting card business. It's called Paper Bag Graphics that was developed in my addiction. Most of the medium that I use are paper bags. The book is done on a paper bag. But I also use this now for my after-school program. I work with Philadelphia Parks and Recreations. I've been with Philadelphia Parks and Recreations actually prior to my addiction, and by the grace of God, one of my colleagues was able to get me back into it. So I've been working with now with the after-school programs, performing arts camps, and what I'm doing now is just introducing the arts to people as young as 5. And I hold them until they're teenagers. And my responsibility now is to introduce them to the creative arts, whether it's creative writing, visual arts, dancing, theater, or hand percussion, which I'm a drummer. So, but what I do is I introduce them, and in 8 weeks, I'm responsible for taking them to a production. So that means that my hands are tied for 8 weeks to make sure that they're not only getting the information, excelling the information, and then being able to present the information that I give them. So it's just been a thing where it's been rewarding for me to be able to take all my skill sets and just be able to plant them in these young people and then watch them come back. I've seen some of them come back to me not even realizing who they were. Hey, Mr. Kim, I'm so-and-so and so-and-so. And I ask, how old are you? Oh, I'm 20-something years old now. So, but I'm doing this, I'm acting, or I've got this art exhibit going, or I just recorded this. So it's rewarding, and it just makes me feel good to know that the time that I spent away from them, that time that I was incarcerated, God was making me the best version of myself. I didn't even realize that that time away was where God was refining me, redesigning me, and setting me up to come out and be a better instrument of hope for not only children, but for whoever will be willing to listen. So I realized that these gifts, they're not just for me. They're for everybody that comes in contact with me. And I realized that every person I come in contact with, I have to be willing to pour myself into. And that's where my success comes in. Not being selfish with the gift, but being able to pour it into anybody who really needs it to help them take them to the next level. Because my trajectory has changed. Before I was incarcerated, I was working for the city. I had a t-shirt design company. I was just starting in my music. It wasn't as in deep in my music, but the time that I spent incarcerated, I know how I produce concerts, I promote concerts, I do my own advertising, I do my own visuals, I set up my own interviews. I have 30 musicians that rely on me to keep them going in the industry. I mentor young musicians to make sure they recognize the red flags. I deal with the old musicians because right now, the way the music industry is in Philadelphia, a lot of the old musicians are being phased out. So I'm trying to create platforms now where all of the art skills that I have that I can use to help other people maintain themselves. So that's where I am right now. And only by the grace of God am I able to do that.
Thank you. So some of the issues that I think are important to talk about are issues around what happens to someone when they leave prison. In the United States of America, when you go to prison, you lose your ID. And there are some states where you'll get your ID back before you get out of prison, but in a lot of states, you don't. In Pennsylvania, it really depends on the county you're in. Bucks County just passed new legislation where they have a deal with PennDOT where they're allowing people who are incarcerated to get their ID before they come out. But if you come out of prison without an ID, you can't do anything. You can't get a job without an ID. You can't rent an apartment without an ID. There are certain barriers that are set up by the carceral system that really make coming back into society incredibly difficult for people that have served their time. And ID is one of them, but again, having a record and not being able to find housing, that's another big one. And then the fact that it's really difficult to find work. Leading up to talking about an amazing program that the Community College of Philadelphia has put together called the I Am More program. I Am More is for people that have been incarcerated, but also for their families. So if your dad or your mom has been incarcerated or is currently incarcerated, you can qualify for this I Am More program. And I'm handing this over to my friend Suave because he is one of the directors of I Am More and can speak to the program more fully.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yes.
The I Am More program, when I was hired, I went to community college to speak and end up with a job. True story. At first, I did not want to work at community college. Because I was like, this ain't gonna work. Because, when I go into a room, I read the room very good. And I was reading the room when I went in there, and I was like, oh, there's problems. Because people that was there for 20, 30 years did not want a formerly incarcerated person running anything in their department. Because, they see their job as a threat. And I was like, calm down, chill. Not here for your job. I'm here to do a job, not for your job. So the program had like 3 non-active students when I took over it. And today we have 130 students, 3 years. And I tell people, I don't care who you hire to do this job. if it's not someone with lived experience, it's not going to work. It's really not going to work. And the program, before I took it over, it's almost like being in prison, because all the students went to the same class, they all have to move at the same time, and I'm like, whoa, that's not going to work, because you put in a label on their back. If you go into a class and the teacher want to be a butthole, they say, well, you've been incarcerated, you tell us about it. So we changed that. Now when you come into our program, you are a community college student. You are not formerly incarcerated, you're not a number. Nobody in the school know you've even been in the justice system but me and someone else. That's it. Nobody else know who's who in the program. And we managed to grow the program into 130 students. A bunch of them graduated May 3rd. Big class. And to me, that job is better than anything else, because I see people come home straight from prison and still when they browns into the programs. Because yes, it's a college program, you have to do the work, but we also do wraparound services. We have partnerships with different organizations that provide clothes. You need an ID, we know how to get your ID to that. What else do you need? You need some housing, we know a couple of people that can help you with that. You need a job. We make it so you want to come to school, because I don't expect somebody that's living in a halfway house to come to school every day and study. That's not going to work. They can't concentrate. You need a computer, we get you a computer. You need some Wi-Fi, we get you some Wi-Fi. You know, and sometimes we have to do this. And the reward is that on May 3rd, I have a bunch of students graduating. I got students that served 1 year, the oldest one served 45 years. Yes, that's the type of programs we're running. And I give credit to community college all the time, because they hire me to do the job. But I also give credit to the man and woman in the program that come in and dedicate themselves to changing their life around. Because if it wasn't for them, we don't have a program. And she tells you, our program, I teach art, because I'm an artist. I also teach the making of podcasts. I teach them how to do podcasts. I teach them how to own their narrative, how to tell the story and not be ashamed of it. We all make mistakes, but we are not our worst mistake. That's what I teach my students. And hopefully, you know, in the next 3 years, all 130 of them will graduate. And we got mothers, let me finish this. We got mothers, grandmothers, aunts, grandkids, children of incarcerated people, formerly incarcerated people. I even got some COs that have gotten in trouble while in the DOC that are now part of our programs.
Great. I want to talk about barriers. You kind of hit on it.
Yeah.
So it takes a village. Let's be honest. I was talking this morning, and I always like when I talk to make sure that you have a takeaway. Like when you leave here, what should you be thinking? What should you be doing? And my advice to you is when you walk out this door to be thinking that there's a great line. I believe, I quote Ted Lasso, but it's actually Walt Whitman. He said, we should all be curious and not judgmental. And I think when it comes to helping people that are justice impacted, we need to be curious. We need to ask them the questions from and really dig in. What's the issue? What is it that you really need? And we often don't see what they see, quite frankly, and we need to be open to really digging deeper. For example, for women, oftentimes they're not coming to class or not going to program, they're not going to work because they can't afford feminine products. I had no idea what period poverty was until I started working in North Philadelphia, and women wouldn't come to class because they had challenges with that. Diapers, baby formula, really basic things that we should be asking. I just went through an experience last Tuesday. I spoke in Lancaster County, and I was stopped in King of Prussia to get my real ID, and I was all excited about it. But as I stood in line and went through the process, it hit me like a brick. How many people coming home from prison do you believe are going to possibly get a real ID? Zero. There's not a single person. It took me a while to find the documents that I needed. And fortunately, I have a passport because I travel a lot. I have a social security card. And why is it that, driver's licenses aren't given to every single person, or state ID isn't given to every person that walks out of prison or jail? I haven't yet got a good reason, and I do some work in Harrisburg, and I chair the employment subdivision for the Pennsylvania Reentry Council, and no one will give me an answer. Like, do we not believe that we can identify that person? Then I think we have bigger problems than we think we have. But things like ID, very basic things. If you ask me when I came home, I lived in a shelter for a year and a half when I came home in North Philadelphia. And honestly, if you ask me what I needed at the time, I needed toilet paper. Quite frankly, it was a challenge to find toilet paper to wipe my ass every day because I lived in a private shelter so that's what they did. They got reimbursed from the state. It was a money-making, it's no longer open, but there were more overdoses in my shelter at Lehigh and Germantown than I ever saw anywhere in my life. Constantly, people ODing on K2 was the drug of choice at the time. And I think we all need to be curious, like, what is it people really need when they come home, and ask those hard questions. And sometimes it takes some digging. And it's really hard. And I'll give you one other one, which is, we talked about employment and getting a job. I want all of you to imagine, just for a second, the most embarrassing thing you've ever done in your life. Just imagine the very most embarrassing thing you've ever done. Now imagine sitting in front of someone and having to tell that story to somebody and asking them for a job. Think about it. It's really hard. And there's a lot of people that have a challenge telling their story and explaining it, and some people don't. But I think we need to be curious. We need to really be curious, not so judgmental, and try to figure out, like, how do we fix this?
And if you're wondering what you could do for someone, is become a mentor to them. Because a lot of time we come home and we don't have that one person that we will call for advice. And he will tell you, a lot of times we don't talk about the trauma of being out here, but there is some trauma. And I remember not too long ago, I went through an event that triggered me. And I realized, I was like, whoa. This man here came to visit me at community college and gave me advice. I ain't gonna tell you what it was, but he came to community college, and it was
good.
And it was when my car was stolen.
I did.
But that triggered me. That put me in a space where I was ready to go back to prison for a car. Somebody stole my car, but it triggered me because all the stuff I went in prison, and I was like, nobody ever took a pack of oodles and noodles for me. You want to take a car? Oh, hell no. And it took people like Jeff come to me like, bro, we talked to me. And he didn't tell me what to do. He just talked to me. And he was like, talk to me. What's going on? Right? And a lot of time people don't have that. And we so hard-headed that we don't want to talk to our families because we think that our families don't understand. And a lot of times they don't, because they never had to deal with that trauma. But there is a lot of trauma that we come home with. And that incident showed me that if I didn't have the right support team that I got out here, I would have been back in prison. That's real. Because when you go to prison, they give you a handbook with all the rules and regulations and policies that you have to learn. But when you come out, there is no handbook. Nobody tells you you're going to confront this. You got to pay bills. You got to confront we can't rent to you. I think you talked about it, about getting an apartment. Well, guess what? If you come home from prison after serving decades in prison, you're not going to get an apartment, even if you got the money, because you don't have no credit. First thing they're going to do is run your credit. You're not going to get that. So a lot of time we forced to live in the same neighborhoods that took us to prison. We forced to live in them neighborhoods again. When you go for a job, even with a degree, it took me almost a year to get a good job. Almost a year. And my first job, the guy was paying me $15 an hour. And I thought I made it in the world. I just did, with no benefits.
That's a lot.
With no benefits. But I kept telling myself, if I do good here, something else is going to pop up. My second job was working at the 25th Police District as a case manager. And I was like, okay, it's possible, man. And but I had a team of people that was by me. I had a reverend called Roger Supernet that came to the halfway house and picked me up every day to the point where I was like, Rev, I'm cool, I can do it on my own now. But every day for about 6 months, he was in front of the halfway house picking me up. Where you need to go, I got you. And now that I look at it, I needed that because I would have got lost in the city. So if you're wondering what you could do for someone, be a mentor to someone. It don't take no money, it don't take nothing. All it takes is a couple of minutes in the phone and you will be surprised the difference that you will have on that person's life.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here tonight and taking the time to listen to this conversation. And I just hope that you will learn more and keep your minds open to the fact that returning citizens need to be respected and have a chance to have served their time and move forward.